Freile. So far, we have talked about the fact that the sectors of the space of variations have certain characteristics parameters. For simplicity, we have agreed to consider these characteristics as frequency characteristics. If the frequency of your mental radiation, provided that the soul and mind are united, coincides with the frequency of a certain sector, then the power of external intention carries out the transition. In other words, the scenario and scenery of this sector materialize in the layer of your world. The soul of each person also has a unique individual set of parameters, the soul's Freile. Again, for simplicity of the model, we will agree to consider the soul's Freile of a person as his characteristic frequency. The Freile of one person differs from the Freile of another in the same way as the shapes of snowflakes differ, which are always unique. The Freile characterizes the individual essence of the soul of a person. There is no point in further deepening this definition. One can only guess what it is. Since the Freile manifests itself implicitly, it is hidden under the masks of the mind that each person wears in one way or another. The only thing that is certain is that each of us has an individual and unique essence. You can describe the character, habits, manners, appearance of a person you know, but behind all these characteristics, there is one integral image that you understand without words. This individual essence, which is understandable without words, we will call Freile. You may have met people who have an inexplicable charm. Surprisingly, they may even have an unattractive appearance. However, as soon as you start talking to such a person, you immediately forget about his physical shortcomings and completely succumb to the charm. When asked what the secret of charm is, you can only mumble that there is something in him. There is no other explanation. Such people are very rare. If they are not in your circle, look for them among the stars of show business. The distinctive feature of such personalities is exceptional beauty and charm. Coming from the depths of the soul, this is not dull beauty. You will immediately determine this. Doll-like beauty only meets the requirements of established standards in appearance. So, from the point of view of the Freile, the secret of charming beauty is not that a person has spiritual beauty or some special spiritual qualities. You will have to accept or not accept, if you like, another paradoxical conclusion of transurfing. So-called spiritual beauty does not exist, but only the harmony of the relationship between the soul and the mind. If a person does not love himself, is dissatisfied with himself, is engaged in an unloved business, if his mind is in confusion, at odds with the soul, then he cannot have charming beauty. Any conflict between the soul and the mind is reflected in the appearance and character of a person. If a person is satisfied with himself, loves himself, lives with pleasure, is engaged in a favorite business, then an inner light emanates from him. This means that the mind is tuned to the Freile of the soul. The unity of the soul and the mind identifies the mental energy of a person with the nature of external intention. Self-satisfaction, or harmony of the relationship between soul and mind, also gives rise to something similar. Soul comfort lights an inner light that reminds the soul of its true nature, which is why the beauty of harmony is perceived by people as charm or soulful beauty. Such beauty even causes hidden envy. Why are you all blooming? The soul feels comfort when the mind does not stifle it in its case, but cherishes it like a rose in a greenhouse, admires it, carefully looks after it, and allows each petal to open freely. This is the rare case that is commonly called happiness. Freile manifests itself in the form of hobbies, interests, everything that is done with love and desire. Freile strings are often silent for a long time. Sometimes it happens that some sign makes the string ring. This can be a casually thrown remark that for some reason sinks into the soul, or something seen that immediately attracts the soul with some special magnetism. A vaguely perceived attraction soon manifests itself again and again. This is the external intention of the soul at work. But since this is a vague attraction of the soul, the external intention also works without purpose. It is necessary to listen to the dictates of the soul in order to pick them up with the mind. Then you can catch the external intention and quickly get what you want. What prevents the mind from establishing a relationship with the soul? The same old importance and the same old friends' pendulums. They impose false goals and values on people. As shown above, it is the pendulums that set the standards of beauty, success, and well-being. Internal and external importance makes a person compare himself with these standards. Naturally, the mind finds a bunch of shortcomings and begins to actively hate itself, and therefore the soul. It tries on all sorts of masks, trying to fit the frail to the established standards. As a rule, nothing good comes of this. As a result, the discord between the soul and the mind deepens even more. What kind of spiritual comfort is there? The mind waters its rose with nothing but reproaches and discontent, and it withers more and more. The mind rushes to search for treasures anywhere but to its soul. Pendulums beckon loudly and seductively, and the soul only quietly and timidly tries to declare its abilities and inclinations. The mind does not listen to the soul, but tries to remake the frail. Naturally, nothing good comes of this. As a result, the soul and mind converge in rejecting their imaginary imperfection. External intention immediately transfers a person to lifelines, where rejection is further aggravated, since imperfection is literally materialized. The mind believes that if you put on a corrective mask, you can adjust to the established standard. As you understand, this is a senseless attempt to catch up with a mirage. Instead of using the precious uniqueness of your frail, a person blindly beats against the glass, following someone else's success. But the success of a star is born precisely by tuning her mind to the frail of her soul. The mirage hunter does not succeed, and he gets even more dissatisfaction with himself. Expressing dissatisfaction with himself, a person will never get to the lifelines where he is satisfied with himself. The parameters of his radiation satisfy exactly those lifelines, where there will be even more reasons for dissatisfaction. This is the kind of senseless game that pendulums impose on people. But for pendulums, this game has a very specific meaning, since discontent and dissatisfaction are their favorite energetic dishes. How to tune the mind to the soul's frail. The only way is to convince your mind that your soul is worthy of love first and foremost. First, you need to love yourself, and only then pay attention to the merits of others. Do not confuse self-love with self-love, narcissism, or complacency. Complacency is generated by elevating yourself above others and creates the most dangerous excess potential. To love yourself means to understand your uniqueness and accept yourself as you are, with all your shortcomings. Your love for yourself should not have any conditions, otherwise it will turn into excess potential. Aren't you worthy of simply loving yourself? After all, you are the only one with you. If a person has gone too far in the struggle with his frail, it will be difficult for him to just go and love himself. How can I love myself because I don't like myself? Look at the position of the mind. I love myself if I like myself. This is pure excess potential, born of increased internal and external importance. External importance is that the standards set by someone are an absolute truth for me. Do I value other people's virtues too highly? Internal importance is that I force myself to follow other people's standards. And who said that I am worse than them? Me and only me. Is my self-esteem too low? To love yourself, knock external importance off the pedestal and stop worshiping other people's standards. Who is stopping you from creating your own standards? It is better for others to chase yours. Throw off your internal importance and let yourself go. You are not obliged to meet and follow other people's standards. You must always be aware that it is not you who needs importance, but the pendulums. When you love your soul with all your mind, the external intention itself will transfer you to the lifelines where you will be fully satisfied with yourself. If, despite everything, you like yourself, you will be able to deceive the external intention and reveal virtues that you do not even suspect. When your mental energy radiates self-satisfaction, the external intention will pick you up and transfer you to the lines where there is truly something to be proud of. One of the commandments says, "Love your neighbor as yourself." For some reason, everyone pays attention to the need to love your neighbor. But the commandment implies that love for yourself is there from the beginning. Leave the game imposed by pendulums and start loving yourself from this day on. Buy your favorite treat and throw a party. Take good care of yourself. Someone may maliciously continue. Indulge your weaknesses, bad inclinations. This is the demagogy of pendulums, and I think I do not need to enter into polemics with them. You yourself understand what love for yourself means. And weaknesses and bad inclinations in a person are induced precisely by pendulums. No need to look for the Holy Grail somewhere in the jungle. The Holy Grail is inside you. It is the Freile of your soul. Unity of soul and mind. The soul comes into this world, trustingly stretching out its childish hands. But then it turns out that the world has been captured by pendulums, which have turned it into a jungle. The pendulums immediately try to convince the soul that no one was waiting for it here, that in this world everyone must fight for a place in the sun and pay tribute to the pendulums. They immediately want to put the naive and spontaneous soul in its place. They convince it that no one cares about its desires, that there is more suffering than joy in the world, that holidays happen only on certain days, that you have to work hard for a piece of bread. That's it. The ears droop, despondency comes out in tears in the eyes, or indignation grows. This is wrong, unfair. The fur bristles. It seems to the soul that there can be only one choice, either to trudge dejectedly along the path imposed by the pendulums, or to scratch desperately, achieving its goal. The human mind is captured by pendulums at all levels: mental, emotional, and energetic. The habitual worldview and behavioral reactions of a person are formed precisely by pendulums. A person thinks and acts as it is beneficial to them. The soul, following the mind, falls into the case of conditioning. Conditionality manifests itself literally in everything. A person is forced to put up with many restrictions and play the role assigned to him in the imposed game. In such conditions, the soul is gradually pushed into the background, and the mind takes the reins into its own hands. The mind instructs the soul, like a small unreasonable child. I know better than you what needs to be done, and your stupid babble is of no use. In most people, the soul has turned into a frightened, disenfranchised creature that has huddled in a corner and sadly watches what the rabid mind is doing. Sometimes there are moments of agreement between the soul and the mind. At such moments, the soul sings, and the mind rubs its hands with satisfaction. But this happens rarely. Most often, the unity of soul and mind is achieved through rejection, fear, and hatred. The soul has no say in matters of choice. The mind treats the soul like a child who asks for a toy he likes in a store. The mind's answers are usually standard. For example, "We don't have money for this." This is how the dream is nipped in the bud. Look at what's happening. The child needs a toy now. If you really can't afford to buy a toy for your child, there is nothing wrong with refusing him, but the soul agrees to wait. However, the mind, with the conviction of a cretin, puts a fatal cross. We don't have money. It turns out that the dream is basically unattainable. The mind has its own logic imposed by pendulums, which benefit from keeping followers on a leash and not even giving them the freedom to choose a dream. The soul has no logic at all. It understands everything literally. The mind insists that there is no money, but the soul is not asking for money, but for a toy. Reason, citing the fact that there is no money, prohibits the toy. It is unrealistic, difficult to achieve, and the soul can only doomedly withdraw into itself and not remind about the toy anymore. And so, the funeral of the dream took place. Reason does not imagine how this dream can be realized. Therefore, it does not let it into the layer of its world after all. Everything in life should be logical and understandable. But all that was needed was to agree to have a toy. Then the external intention would take care of how to get money for it. However, the ordinary worldview formed by pendulums does not allow such miracles. Freedom of choice for adherents does not meet the interests of pendulums. A person mistakenly perceives a rational worldview as an immutable law. However, this law is fake and it can be hacked. Inexplicable miracles often happen in our lives. So why not let one of the miracles into your life? You just need to allow yourself to have what your soul wants. If you throw off the web of prejudices and limitations that pendulums have entangled you in, sincerely believe that you are worthy of your dream, and allow yourself to have what you want, you will get it. Allowing yourself to have is the main condition for the fulfillment of desire. There are other answers from the mind to the soul in the toy store. Nonsense. I know better what you need. And how can we? We are simple people. This is unrealistic. Not everyone has this gift. You do not have the data and abilities. How can you compare to or him? You have to live like everyone else, and so on. If such judgments were not the result of the influence of pendulums, then one could accuse the mind of impenetrable stupidity. But let us hope that, reading these lines, it will nevertheless wake up from its viscous obsession and understand the absurdity of its reasonable arguments. A mind without a soul can do very little in this world. Together, they are capable of everything, because their fusion gives birth to this magical force, external intention. The mind controls the internal intention, and the soul the external. However, the soul is not able to control the external intention purposefully. When the soul and mind merge together, the external intention becomes controllable and can be used to achieve the set goals. Everything that seems difficult or unrealistic to you is really difficult to achieve within the narrow limits of the possibilities of the inner intention of the mind. And who argues? Whatever goal you set for yourself, I agree that its achievement is difficult to achieve within the limits of a rational worldview. But you can't give up on your dream just because some inflated authorities have taken upon themselves the right to determine where reality is and where it is not. Take advantage of your right to have a personal miracle. The secret of happiness is as simple as the secret of unhappiness. It's all about the unity or discord between the soul and the mind. The older a person is, the greater this discord. The mind submits to the influence of pendulums, and the soul becomes unhappy. In childhood, the soul still hopes to get its toy, but over time, this hope fades. The mind finds more and more confirmation that the dream is difficult to achieve, and postpones its implementation for later. This postponement for later usually continues throughout life. Life ends, but the dream remains lying in a dusty box. To achieve unity of soul and mind, it is necessary to first determine what exactly this unity should be achieved in, that is, to define your goals. Despite the apparent obviousness, this question is not at all trivial. People, as a rule, know exactly what they do not want, but find it difficult to formulate their true desires. This is explained by the fact that pendulums strive to subordinate people to their interests and impose false goals on them. There can be no talk of any unity of soul and mind if the mind rushes in pursuit of an alluring mirage, and the soul lies to something completely different. In addition to everything, people are so busy and preoccupied with performing various jobs for pendulums that they simply have no time to sit down and calmly think about their true desires. It is necessary to specially set aside time and remember what the soul lay in back then, in childhood. What did you like? What did you want? What really attracted you? And what did you have to give up over time? Ask yourself, does your old goal still attract you? Think about what you really want. Is this goal false? Do you really want it with all your heart, or do you just want to want it? When you think about your goal, you need to drop the internal and external importance. If the external importance is too high, the goal will fascinate you with its prestige, as well as its inaccessibility. Have you fallen for the pendulum's bait? If the internal importance is too high, it may seem that the goal is beyond your capabilities. The goal again beckons with its inaccessibility. But do you really need it? When thinking about the goal, do not think about prestige. Knock the goal off the pedestal of inaccessibility. In this way, you'll drop the external importance. When thinking about the goal, do not think about the means to achieve it. In this way, you'll drop the internal importance. Think only about your comfort. If you achieve your goal, do you really feel good, or do you still have a stone hanging over your soul? Doubts about the reality of achieving what you want do not mean that it was not necessary. The main thing is that your soul sings when you think about the desired goal. Despite its attractiveness, if something oppresses you, it may be false. We will dwell on all these issues in more detail in the next chapter. If you do not have a specific goal and do not want anything, then either you have low energy or your mind has finally driven your soul into a case. In the first case, you can increase your vitality if you take care of your health. Perhaps you do not even know what good health is. With good health, life is enjoyable and you want everything at once. The soul cannot not want anything because this life is a unique chance for it. In the second case, you have only one way out to love yourself. Are you too carried away by caring for others? Put yourself first. Others will not get anything good from you if your own soul is relegated to the background. By giving yourself entirely to serving others, even close people or even pendulums, you will waste your life senselessly. Life is not given to you to serve someone, but to realize yourself as a person. By locking your soul in a case, you create a powerful excess potential of internal hidden dissatisfaction, which will pour out in all sorts of misfortunes on you and your loved ones. It will seem to you that you wish people well, but in fact, all this care will be harmful to them. Take good care of yourself. Treat yourself with compassion and attention. Then your soul will warm up and spread its wings. Don't believe anyone who tells you that you have to change yourself to achieve success. You've heard this before, haven't you? This is a favorite recipe of pendulums. They say that if you can't do something, then you have to work on yourself. How should you change from the point of view of pendulums? Turn away from yourself. Turn to face the pendulums and follow the rule. Do as I do in order to satisfy their demands and act in their interests. And in order to change yourself, you'll have to fight with yourself. What kind of unity of soul and mind can we talk about if you do not accept yourself, do not love yourself, and fight with yourself? The soul will not accept false goals. It has its own inclinations and needs. Chasing false goals, you will either achieve nothing, or, having achieved, you will understand that you do not need it. Transurfing has nothing to do with pendulums, and therefore offers a completely opposite path. Do not change yourself, but accept yourself. Turn away from the husk that pendulums impose and turn your mind to your soul. Listen to the dictates of your soul. Consciously drop importance. Allow yourself to have, and you will receive everything your heart desires. To bring soul and mind to unity, you need to pay attention to the state of mental comfort more often. You feel comfortable if at the moment nothing bothers you, does not oppress you. You are cozy and calm. Mental discomfort signals the opposite. You have a vague anxiety. Something oppresses you. You are afraid of something. You feel depressed. Some kind of burden hangs on your soul. If such sensations manifest themselves clearly and you understand their origin, then this is discomfort of the mind. The mind, as a rule, knows what frightens, worries, and oppresses it. In this case, you can rely on the mind, which will tell you a solution. The discomfort of the soul is more complicated because it manifests itself implicitly as a vague premonition. The mind says, everything is fine. Everything is going as it should. There is no reason to worry. And yet, despite reasonable arguments, something oppresses you. This is the rustle of the morning stars. Hearing the voice of the soul is not so difficult. The task is only to pay attention to it. The voice of reason with its logical reasoning sounds too loud, and a person does not attach importance to vague and unclear premonitions. Carried away by its logical analysis and forecasting of events, the mind is simply not inclined to listen to the feelings of the soul. In order to learn to hear the rustle of the morning stars, there is no other way than to develop the habit of paying attention to the state of mental comfort. Whenever you need to make a decision, listen first to the voice of reason, and then to the feelings of the soul. As soon as the mind has made a decision, the soul reacts to this decision, either positively or negatively. In the latter case, you will experience a vague feeling of mental discomfort. If you forgot to pay attention to the state of comfort in time, try to remember later what feelings you experienced. When the decision was made, you were visited by a fleeting feeling. At that moment, the mind was so carried away by its analysis that it had no time for feelings. Now remember how this very first fleeting sensation seemed to you. If it was an oppressive feeling against the background of the optimistic reasoning of the mind, then the soul clearly said, no. How much can you trust the soul's premonitions? If you believe that you have a premonition of a certain event that should happen, you cannot trust such premonitions. There is no guarantee that the mind correctly interprets the information of the soul. The only reliable interpretation can only be mental discomfort in response to the decision made by the mind. Soul comfort cannot yet serve as a guarantee that the soul says yes. Perhaps it simply does not have an answer. But when the soul says no, you'll feel it with all certainty. As you know from the material in the previous chapters, the soul is able to see sectors of the space of options that will be realized if the decision of the mind is put into action. It sees the result and expresses its attitude, positive or negative. However, you can see for yourself from your own experience that if the soul says no, it is always right. Thus, in cases when you need to make a decision, you now have a reliable criterion of truth, a state of mental discomfort. If the soul says no, and the mind says yes, boldly refuse if possible. The soul cannot wish bad things for itself. If the mind says, must and will have to, then act according to the circumstances. In life, sometimes you have to put up with the inevitable. In any case, the criterion of mental discomfort brings clarity and certainty to issues where the scales are tipping. Having reached the agreement of the soul and mind regarding the chosen goals, you need to achieve unity in the determination to have and act. The inner intention of the mind must merge with the outer intention of the soul. If you act within the framework of the inner intention and the outer intention is directed in the same direction, then consider that the goal is already in the bag. In case of uncertainty of the inner intention, when you do not clearly imagine by what means you can achieve the goal, work on the determination to have. The outer intention is much stronger than the inner one, so it will find an option for you itself. It is necessary to achieve the same unity of soul and mind in the determination to have, which is manifested in strong feelings. Soul and mind, as a rule, are united in adoration, hostility, fears, and the worst expectations. We love, hate, and fear with all our hearts. When the soul and mind are united, a frantic feeling is born. He who does not know how to hate will not learn to love, said the famous Russian writer Nikolai Chernyshevsky. If the goal is chosen correctly, both the soul and the mind will be pleased. The only thing that can spoil the pleasure is thoughts generated by the inaccessibility of the goal or a narrow zone of mental comfort. The situation when the mind doubts reality and the soul feels constrained in the new chair can be corrected with the help of slides. You already know how to do this. By expanding the comfort zone, you will achieve the frantic joy of unity when the soul sings and the mind rubs its hands with satisfaction. I repeat once again, when thinking about the goal, do not think about its prestige, inaccessibility, and the means to achieve it. Pay attention only to the state of mental comfort. Are you feeling good or bad? Only this matters. Otherwise, you can confuse mental constraint with mental discomfort. Constraint, or a kind of shyness, comes from the unusualness of the situation. Is all this really for me? Discomfort shows oppression, burden, oppressive necessity, despondency, apprehension, painful anxiety. If the stiffness is not corrected by slides, then it is obvious discomfort. Then you should think again, without trying to deceive yourself. Is this goal really so necessary for you?